Hello and welcome to our first official / free episode of Battle Babes. My name is Heather and I'm here with Laura.
Hi.
Laura's a little sick tonight if you guys can't tell. She's spent too much time with my kids, I guess.
Yeah, just a little stuffed up, but functional.
Functional. Well, that's better than what I've been for 3 days. At least we were both able to be here and get this done. I think we're going to talk about just ourselves and introduce ourselves because we haven't done that yet.
Nope, we haven't.
We just kind of went straight in and thought, hey, we should introduce ourselves so people actually know a little bit about us and are able to connect with us on more than just Battletech kind of thing.
Yeah, I think everybody knows who we are. Well, those people who do know who we are know us through proxy of the guys.
Yeah, and it's, I'm Lee's wife.
No, you're more than that.
Well, thank you. I think I am more than that, but sometimes it's like, I'll talk to you because you're Lee's wife and you'll pass on the message. It's like, thanks. That's, not what I need.
Yeah.
So we're going to just talk about us and then talk a little bit about what to expect with our podcast. And things will definitely change as time goes by, as we're just starting with this and it's trying to figure things out right now. And as time goes by, we'll be a little bit more specific, I guess.
Hopefully. And if people have ideas, they can leave comments.
Yeah, definitely leave comments, like, share. And if you look down in the description, you can find a suggestions link to a Google form to give us some ideas on things that you might want to hear us talk about or even want to participate in a bit of a conversation with us about, because we'd love to be able to do that sometime too.
Yes, absolutely.
My name is Heather Thoms, and I am the wife of one of the founders of the current Calgary Battletech League, also one of the founders of Uncivil Discourse and Rambletech for the Calgary Battletech League.
And I'm Laura Ormston, and I am the mother of one of the youngest gentlemen playing in the league this year.
Gentleman.
Gentleman. He is a gentleman. He can be. He has his defining moments.
Yeah. He's a good kid. I think you were lucky comparatively to me. Like, I've lived from the prairies of Alberta to the Bay of Fundy, out in New Brunswick, up to the Northwest Territories, and even in Germany when I was little, right? So I had a lot of moving around, but you, lucky enough, didn't have that.
Yeah, no, only lived in Alberta, born and raised. I've been lucky enough to travel outside of Alberta. I'm an Alberta girl through and through.
I've spent most of my life here in Alberta, but now I call Strathmore my home. But for the longest time, my mom's hometown in Saskatchewan, tiny little Porcupine Plain, was always my hometown because we never lived anywhere long enough for me to say this is where I'm from. But now I can proudly say I'm from Strathmore.
Well, I live in Strathmore. I've lived in Calgary longer than I lived in my hometown, but I still don't say I'm from Calgary. I still say I'm from Whitecourt. I'm little town, northern Alberta, and it's not going to change no matter what. That's my hometown, and it'll always be that way.
When you grew up in a town, and even if you were to spend the first 12 years or 14 years of your life there and moving, right, then it is your hometown. With my dad being in the military, we moved around a lot. I didn't have that hometown, so it was always my mom's hometown. Like, I was born there, so that's kind of like, hey, first place I saw, so that's my hometown. I could not figure out what the heck I wanted to do. I didn't know till the last semester of high school what I was going to do.
You got me beat there. I didn't even know at all. I got to grade 12, thought I wanted to do one thing, did some research into what classes I would need to take for the first semester, first year, and didn't like what I needed to take. So I went, no, I'm not going to do it. So I wanted to be a forensic pathologist. I wanted to work with dead people. And in my head, that's all I wanted to do. But the first year of classes was dealing with if you got called into court to testify and crime scene, which it wasn't too bad. Like if you needed to actually go to a crime scene to do stuff, but dealing with any of the cops and the lawyers and all stuff. I'm like, well, I want this job to deal with dead people. I don't want to deal with live people. So I ended up not actually following that path. I decided to take a year off school and work.
And you've been doing that ever since, hey?
And I've been doing that, yeah, then I got pregnant. The rest is history.
Looking back at being a high school student, I had it all planned out what I was going to do. And going into the last semester of high school, my plan had been to go to culinary school. And I was going to open up a kind of like a diner kind of thing. And my best friend in high school, she was going to school to be a hairdresser, and she was going to open up a salon next door, and we were going to have things that worked with spa days and do different packages and stuff. When I sat down with my mom, talk about what my plans were, she's like, well, are you sure you want to stand over a stove all day? Like, you've got really flat feet. I already had starting to have knee problems then from curling. So she said to me, well, why don't you look at teaching? You've always loved kids. That was that. Been since 2005, I've been teaching. So it's kind of...
And the funny thing is, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but got my first job, cook at Boston Pizza. And I worked in and out of restaurants for the next 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I did 5 years working for Princess Auto. And that was just after Alex was born. So yeah, did that for 5 years and then ended up going back into the restaurant industry. Went back to work in the kitchen again. But I had enough experience to be the kitchen manager or assistant kitchen manager, a little bit more management. And then when I got the job at Mr. Mike's, they allowed me to learn some of the front end management. And I didn't wait tables because I wasn't certified to serve alcohol, but I did what's called expediting. So when the food hits the window, I was the one to make sure that everything on the order was there and correct, and then got the server to run their food to the table while it was still hot.
Yeah, that's a real important thing.
Yeah, and I absolutely loved that job. And then a friend of mine called me up and said, I know you're looking for something different. I just got a promotion at work and they're looking to fill my spot. Send me your resume and I'll pass it on to my boss to look over to fill my old position. And I got the job and I've been there for 4 years now. And it worked out great because it's got to be almost 10 years ago now. I went and did an accelerated course in graphic design through Reeves College. And the job that I've now had for 4 years actually utilizes a lot of what I learned in the graphic design field. So I can actually say that I took schooling and I am now using it practically at a job.
Now, looking at our name, Battle Babes, it wasn't really hard to come up with it.
Not really. It was almost handed to us on a silver platter. We just needed to make it our own.
Right? It started out with Lee and Brett saying we were the Battletech women, or
BTW.
Yeah, BTW, which we had some very interesting suggestions for what the W could mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not really flattering ones, but yes.
Yeah. The worst, I honestly have to say, came from my little sister. And I'm not going to say the word because it is not appropriate.
No. Yeah, no, it's at least not for our channel.
No. I don't even know if YouTube has those kinds of channels. I've never, anyways, we're not going to go there. But yeah, I like when we switched from Battletech women to Battle Babes because you and I talked, and we do love talking Battletech League, right?
Yes, we do.
That's kind of where the name came from. But I love Battletech, but I don't have the history and I don't have the investment like the guys do into Battletech.
Not yet, anyway.
No, and that's right. Like maybe later on, but when we thought of the name Battle Babes, I just thought, well, that could be so cool because we could do so many different things with that. Doesn't just have to be Battletech. It could be any other kind of board game.
Board game, computer game, challenges that we face in everyday life.
Right, and just talking about Battle Babes, we could throw in other babes.
Yeah, one of yours wants to be in on one of our recording sessions.
Oh, yes.
That could be entertaining to have a child of 2 Battletech players putting her 2 cents worth in.
Right? Even just looking at the word battle, you and I were talking about just the different types of battles that anybody has to go through on a regular basis, whether it's even getting up in the morning or paying bills, as kids will be kids dealing with other kids.
It's a well-rounded title.
It is. I definitely like it. And I think it opens it up as to what we can and why we were doing it. Looking at why we started doing our podcast, it really was me taking over some of those interviews for the Calgary Battletech League to just try and give the players a little bit more voice and to be able to share some of those personalities. And then it's kind of grown from there, which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah. It started off you doing on location, on-site interviews with some of the guys, catch them with, their memories fresh of what they were doing in their game. And then it broadened out where Uncivil Discourse let you just take over the interviews, took something off their plate so they can focus more on the games and the guy stuff.
When you joined in to start helping with doing some of the predictions, I think is where you kind of came in.
Yeah, somebody, I think from last season, made a comment about keeping track of predictions and how accurate the guys were at predicting games.
Oh, that's how it started. I remember now.
So I took the initiative and I created a spreadsheet to be all organized, and I went back through all of the Uncivil Discourse podcasts to write down what the guys had predicted, and then followed it up with how accurate they were. And 3/4 of the way through the season, I tossed some numbers at them and went, hey, you guys are actually doing really good on your predictions. And they're like, oh, wow, well, can you keep doing that through the whole rest of the season and then the playoffs? And then I think I got roped into another interview with you this time because Lee interviewed me earlier in the season. When I hopped on and did the interview with you, there were no real strict by the books, these are the questions I'm going to ask you. It was just a conversation, and I felt at ease talking to you. And then afterwards, we were just chatting, and it's like, well, why couldn't we just do this normally? Why don't we do our own?
Yeah, it was at first, it was just a conversation about putting them in the interviews, and even I think our first predictions were put in with the guys on the CBL website. And this was last year with COVID and everything, you weren't at the den and you and I hadn't really gotten to know each other. And then this year, just even since probably about, I don't know, October-ish, is when we actually started making those connections and realized that you and I have a lot of similarities.
Yeah. And you're right. I wasn't able to play at the den. I think I played the first game, maybe the first 2 weeks, and then everything shut down and I wasn't able to make it. So I played a lot of the matches at Brett's place because he has a big enough gaming area where he can host multiple matches. And I remember you and Lee playing a couple of your matches at Brett's. One of the weekends I was there too. Kind of had an interaction, but not really a sit down and, hey, this is me, hey, this is you. I do remember talking a little bit to you at the farewell dinner last year, because we were sitting across the table from each other, but I think that was more talking about being parents.
Between conversations just at the league, I had cross-stitch or something, but got into conversation. No, it was not. What am I talking about? It's freaking Harry Potter, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Talking about Cameron and Harry Potter, I think it was what it was. I think that's where it all kind of started. And when we finally kind of realized, hey, let's do this podcast together, it was just kind of another thing that we were enjoying doing together. And being able to actually have someone else in league that's not one of the guys to be able to connect with was kind of cool. And not being one of the only women, because the first year I played in league, I was the only woman. And then really, there was Mackenzie, but even Mackenzie didn't make a lot of games last year. So I was really the only woman there. And then starting to talk with you just kind of flowed properly.
It was almost a natural progression that we now do this. I was flat out surprised how well we got along, because growing up I had 1, maybe 2 close girlfriends, but as years went on, you either lose track of them or they kind of turned into people that I didn't want to be associated with.
Well, yeah, everybody grows, right? I don't have a lot of friends. Even people that I've been back in contact with from years later, some people I still really have a connection with, but other people I'm like, wow, I have no connection with you. I totally get it. Yeah. when we had first started talking and we had all these similarities, I was like, oh, this is odd. I very rarely meet a woman who likes a lot of the same things as I, would rather hang out with other women like us or guys than deal with the female drama.
Yeah, I think Cam was at Battletech and she saw my purse.
Yeah, I think so.
Which started the whole Harry Potter conversation. And I don't come across a lot of adults who enjoy Harry Potter or geek out about it to the extent that I do until I met you.
And I don't even, for me, it's my 9-year-old daughter.
But you have enough interest that you and I can have a conversation about it and not feel like either of us really knows more or less. The conversations just kind of evolved from there. We went from having, generally childish conversations to conversations about where we grew up, how we grew up, podcast, Battletech, gaming, men.
Exactly. Yep. No, and I think it's looking at why we're doing it. There's just so many different things that kind of directed us to do this. And yeah, it's starting out with the Calgary Battletech podcast, but ultimately it's something that we can make into our own. And if it does kind of go a little bit more towards the women empowerment thing, well, it does.
Now that we figured out we have a lot in common and we've decided to do this podcast, we have yet to come up with a schedule to figure out how often we want to talk to each other and talk to everybody out there. We do know that we're probably going to end up being the filler because the guys stopped doing Uncivil Discourse now that League Play's done. So there's going to be an empty spot on Sundays for us to record in order to release it on the Thursday or the Friday?
Yeah, I think the plan is to release on a Thursday or Friday of the week that we are recording. Like you said, we don't really have a schedule. And it's looking like it's going to be about once a month, once every 2 weeks, especially if we're having to fill in between those other podcasts.
I know they had some filler content last season during the summer. Command Couch and talking general Battletech. What their favorite mechs were, factions or whatnot. We're kind of planning on doing that though. I think that's our next episode we're going to do. We're going to start doing books.
Yeah. Well, and that's one thing we were trying to think about, what would be some ways to be able to continue keeping that Battletech in there in between seasons, right? And I know the guys talk about it all the time on their show about the lore and the history. And I can tell you, I know sweet wah.
Nothing.
Like, I don't know anything at all.
I know some. I think I know a little bit more about the lore for Battletech because Alex's dad and I were in a Mech Warrior roleplay campaign together, which is Battletech mixed with D&D. So I had to learn factions and a little bit more of the mechs and the people, the important people who ran certain factions and why they were important and, kings, queens, leaders, and, all the political stuff. But I've never read any of the novels. And I know that we have people who are very nice and are willing to lend us copies of it so we can both read a book and come back and maybe talk about, 2-3 chapters at a time and our opinions on what we're reading, because I'm pretty sure there's a lot of politics and it's going to be very dry.
Lee has mentioned to it many times about how much I should try reading the books and how they're so interesting. But don't get me wrong, I love history. My major in university was Canadian Studies and Canadian History. I like that. But the books I read with teaching, I read so much cognitive books that really use a lot of brain power, right? A lot of the professional books. And so I really just don't want to read anything that I actually have to understand. Like, I don't get, that sounds really bad. So thinking about these books, I know it's not real. It's not the year 3400 or whatever it is in the book. The thought that I have to learn about when this country or this clan decided to go after these guys and never wanted to, but then even just in League and being able to understand some of the different factions, I think this would be really good. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to read all 200 and some novels. We'll start with the first series that we're going to start with, do it chronologically like we talked about, but I'm thinking, okay, this could be really cool. I promise I'd read the full set, the full 3.
Yeah, we'll read the full 3 and see how we feel. The first 84 books are considered the classic Battletech novels, which is pre-jihad. Obviously, I've looked at a few websites and I've retained some information already.
I'm like, you jihad. Whoa, what does that mean? So that's where this kind of stuff will be good. I'm not going back to the textbooks or the manuals, the operating manuals, the Battletech operating manuals, to read the actual linear history or those specific things yet. Maybe down the road, but I'm liking the idea of maybe kind of understanding some of those word of Blake jokes and why some guys like this faction over this faction, right?
Right, yeah, because there's a lot of guys, it's like, oh yeah, I like these guys because of this guy did this, and this. And I'm like, the only one I really know about, and it's because it's part of my faction from this year, is the one leader lady was absolutely nutters. Off her rockers. Cersei Lannister off her rockers.
Nice.
Yeah, so I'm actually looking forward to reading some of her books, but I don't think it's part of the first trilogy. But I'm actually looking forward to being able to read them, but also having somebody that I can talk to and go, okay, this was absolutely retarded. Why did these guys do this?
Okay, so that's the other thing. And I was literally just thinking about this. I was like, that's another reason I don't want to read it and just read it and only talk to my husband. He doesn't see things the same way I see things. And having you to be able to talk to it about, and one, you're a woman. Two, we have a lot of the same interest ideas, right? We can have these conversations, and I'm not going to get the dumbed down conversation from my husband because of all the other information he has or his viewpoint, which I will talk about the books with him, but it's nice because you can see things kind of the way I can see things too. So having those conversations, and
or if we have a difference of opinion on something that we read, we can have a conversation without feeling like the other person is being condescending or feeling like, my opinion's right, why don't you get it? Because I've had conversations with Alex's dad about some things, and sometimes I get the feeling that he's just agreeing with me to agree with me, kind of to make me be quiet.
Yeah, you don't know what you're talking about, but I'm just going to smile and nod my head at you.
Exactly. Yeah, you don't know what you're talking about, but I'm not going to argue with you because it's not worth it. But I feel if we get through the first 3 books and continue reading them, we're actually going to be able to hold our own in some of these conversations with the guys, and I think they're going to be surprised.
Yeah, I think in the next couple years these boys are bound for a rude awakening.
I think so. I think they might regret letting us have our own show.
Yeah, we'll just see where this goes, right? Speaking of the books we're going to read, just in case anybody's interested in whether you've already read them or you want to read them along with us and participate in the conversation we're going to have, we're going to start with the Great Death Legion trilogy. Starting with the Great Death Legion trilogy looks like a good place to start, kind of from what we've looked at. And our friend that I'm borrowing the books from actually recommended that we start there. It gives a good understanding of their worlds.
Which is exactly what we want. I really don't feel like delving into political books. Would be a very entertaining read as the first introduction for us into the books. So getting more history and lore rather than politics and blah.
Exactly. Having a little bit of the politics would be okay, but I want to get to know some of the characters first, right? Because that's what hooks me in and most people in, right? Is the characters and the settings and building those stories and having some kind of a connection. So I think it's a really good idea to start there. So we'll start with Decision at Thunder Rift, and we'll do a little mini intro to the book. And the cool thing is, as much as it's going to help you and I to understand this world, even if there's people who don't want to read the books, but maybe they're friends of yours, friends of mine that don't really understand or don't know anything about Battletech, this is a good intro without them actually having to read all the specifics.
Right, or even new people to the league. If they want a little bit of a history lesson, they can pop on and listen to a couple of our episodes talking about the books. They can pick and choose which ones they want to listen to.
Right, and so I guess we wanted to talk about what we're going to be doing on the show, and I love that you and I are both so excited about this book talk. Talking about the book, I'm so excited to get started reading that. Actually, I have a couple books on the go, but I think I'm going to take a little bit of hiatus and getting the book from Chris and you being able to get the book from Brett, then we can have a little chat and we will post that in the next couple days, probably before this video gets put out.
Yeah, which is going to make it sound really funny, but that's okay.
That is completely fine. We are a little funny.
Yep, we are.
I'm going to take this funny little lass out of here and probably go play some Switch or something.
That sounds like a plan. I don't know what I'm going to do except try and feel better.
Yeah, I was going to say, you should probably go to sleep. You've had 2 very late nights. I know.
They're worth it, though. They're fun.
There you go. That's all that matters. All right, so adios.
And we'll catch everybody on the flip side.